So this is where a lot of you hang out. And just from my own knowledge, as far as who's in the room, colon hydrotherapist, if you can raise your hand, just so I have a sense of who's here. Thank you. And are most of you massage therapists, depending on the state that you're in? Okay. And anyone else can share with me what your healing practice might be so I know who I'm speaking to? Yes? Got it. Thank you. Okay. Got it. Love it. Energy medicine. Okay. Nursing. ND. Yes. PT. Okay, good. Thank you. So that gives us a nice mix. All right. So a lot of you are, this is where you spend most of your days, hanging out in the digestive system. So hard to talk about the digestive system without talking about the nervous system. And just a quick kind of background. So we have the central nervous system, which is our brain and our spinal cord, and then we have the peripheral nervous system. Okay, so the peripheral nervous system includes a somatic, okay, or more conscious part, and then it includes the autonomic, okay? Autonomics are divided into the sympathetics and parasympathetics, which is what you hear and talk a lot about. So the sympathetics are fight and flight, right, and ready to go. The parasympathetics are rest and relax, let me digest my food. But a lot of us don't talk about the enteric nervous system. So the enteric nervous system is all about the gut, okay? So our gut has this intricate system of nerve fibers, okay? Hundreds of millions of them that run through, that deliver information to the belly and that takes information away from the belly. And this is kind of what it looks like on a more cellular microscopic level, okay? And you can see these nerve fibers, they're everywhere, all right? So it says here that the enteric nervous system has millions of neurons with over 50 million neurotransmitters. So when you get the butterfly feeling in your belly, when you're having an emotion, and vice versa, these are the reasons why. 90% of the body's serotonin, okay, so serotonin is our feel-good neurotransmitter, and over 50% of dopamine, which is another pleasure neurotransmitter, is found in the gut. So here we're learning that the belly is responsible for all of these neurotransmitters. Everyone thinks it's the brain, it's the brain, it's the brain. It's the belly, okay? The other really critical factor to the belly is its immune system modulation, okay? So when you think about it, the gut is the place where the outside world meets the inside world. We do have our skin, but it's a pretty firm barrier. The minute we put something into our mouths, our body needs to know, what do I want to keep and what do I want to get rid of? So it better have a very highly functioning immune system, and it does. It's called the GALT, okay, the gut-associated lymph tissue. So 70% of our immune cells reside in the GI tract. And these are largely dependent upon being exposed to microorganisms to develop, which is why you have little kids and you tell them, go ahead and eat the dirt and do whatever else, because you want to develop that system, right? So most of our immune system and most of our feel-good neurotransmitters are in the belly. So when someone comes in to see me and they say, I feel anxious, I feel depressed, I have all of these things going on, the first thing I want to do is, what's happening in your belly? They come in and they say, I have osteoarthritis, rheumatic disease, I'm going to the belly. So here's the simple answer. No matter what someone comes into my office with, I'm going to the belly, okay? And that's why what you do and your job, why it's so critical. So the gut flora, okay, the balance between the good, the bad, and the ugly. So I don't even know, they put a number on it, it's something like 1 trillion microbes that hang out in the belly. So from stomach all the way to the colon and appendix, we have most organisms in the lower part of the GI tract, okay, you can see the numbers are higher here, with more variety. And this is where you're spending your time, right? You're hanging out in that colon and lower area, really having an opportunity to help change this. So what's the big deal about the gut flora? Well, this is how another level of communication happens between the belly, the brain, and the rest of the body. These microbes are intelligent. We can't even start to understand all that they can do. So they regulate immunity, do things like making vitamins, enzymes, okay, hormones. We talked about the neurotransmitters, regulating inflammation. Their jobs are never ending, and they do it well. So I think yesterday you spent a little time talking about the pathogenic versus the commensal, like the Bacteroides and the Firmicutes, and if there's an imbalance. So I love to run stool analysis in the office because I really get to see what's going on. So it's hard to talk about bacteria without talking about mitochondria. And I'm going to introduce a little bit of a new concept here, because some of what I want to do today is touch on the old, introduce the new, and tie them together with the emotional aspects of our human being. So mitochondria, okay, Krebs cycle, they are responsible for making ATP, our energy, right? That's what they're known for. Mitochondria are almost like an alien species, okay? They have their own DNA. They don't need us. There's about 200 mitochondria for every single human cell. We have about 14 quadrillion at birth. Don't even ask me to write that number. In our 50s, it's about 1.4. That's how many we've lost. So a lot of medicine now is talking about mitochondrial health. It's like a really central part for practitioners like myself who are all about looking for different answers. We're really going into understanding these mitochondria. So our aerobic health and function are really dependent on these beautiful alien structures, and depending on how they're doing, that's going to determine how healthy I am, how long I live, and how well I do it. So the other really interesting thing we found out about the mitochondria, in addition to producing ATP, which is all we learned, okay, they do something which is really kind of special. They produce redox molecules, okay, reduction oxidation molecules. And they found that these molecules have antioxidant properties, and they also have immune system modulation properties, so they can fight those free radicals we talked about, and they can kill pathogens. And we're learning that that's just as important of a role that these mitochondria do. So why am I spending the time to tell you about this? Bacteria in our soil, okay, do the same thing. They create these redox molecules. So there was a time in my practice when I thought I could tell everyone, go home and just eat really good food and it should bring healing, right? Our food should heal us. We shouldn't need all of these other things, but that wasn't happening, and I was wondering why. And it's mostly because our soil has changed so much that we don't have as many of these redox molecules as we did hundreds of years ago. So bacteria in the soil do this job even though they have no DNA and no mitochondria. So one of the things that I've been really researching and working on and slowly implementing in my practice, and I'm mentioning this to you because it's something that you might want to think about and look at where it might fit into your practice. So I'm always recommending probiotics, right? And you probably are too, because we want to reestablish the gut flora and bring that health. But what I started realizing is the probiotics were not doing the job that I had anticipated. And it was mostly because, one, they didn't have enough strains, right? The variety just wasn't enough. We have over 500 to 5,000 different strains in the gut. Most probiotics, maybe they have at max 10 to 25, okay? And also, the numbers weren't enough. 50 billion, 90 billion, that's not going to cover it to really change that flora. What I'm looking at and moving into my practice, and I think it's something you'll see more of, instead of moving to probiotics, I'm actually recommending these redox signaling molecules, because what they do is they seal the tight junctions and they help the gut flora rebalance. They propagate the good bacteria that we need, and it's hundreds of them that they can do. They're not just specific to 2 or 3. So I just wanted to give you an example of one of the companies that makes, there are many companies out there. I like this one. And this is just something new I wanted to throw out there, because you might start hearing a lot more about redox signaling molecules, and at least you have some exposure to it, and maybe think about what you want to do. It has a really quick, great impact on the gut flora and healing, so much faster than my probiotics and digestive enzymes and everything else can do, my glutamine, and you know, it's a nice way of really healing that gut quickly. So, health begins in the gut. For me, the belly is the trunk of my tree, like I always tell my patients, and these are the organ systems that are outlying. So we learned that most of our immune system's in the belly, right? Most of our neurotransmitters are in the belly. And our bodies have 10 times more microbes than human cells. So the bacteria and the microbes that exist within us are highly intelligent, and they know what to do, and they are numerous. We can't start to understand all the benefits. So, now that you know and understand all that biochemistry and science, this is the place I ultimately like to get to. So how is it that thoughts create disease, right? So we just saw it. In my brain, I'm having a thought or a feeling, and then I'm having neurotransmitters and hormones being released that are interacting with the belly, and then the belly sending out its own signals that are then feeding back to the brain. Ultimately, these affect the glands, the blood, the lymph, okay? Again, there's no separation. So if I'm thinking something or feeling something, it ultimately is going to manifest on a physical level. If I'm not sleeping, if I'm very stressed, my adrenal glands they're going to become depleted, right? And then that's going to have consequences, so there's no separation. So looking at some of the major organ systems and emotions that are attached to them on an encouraging side and on the other side. So the lungs are better known as the organs of grief, okay? So when my patients come in and I start to focus on, okay, which organ system, and I call it priority, when I start to look at where's their priority organ, then I look at what's going on this end of the spectrum and what's going on over here, especially if they're not feeling well, okay? So the liver, anger, resentment, the heart, okay, cruelty or hatred, kidneys, fear, the spleen, worry. Oh, I'm sorry, sure. And you can think about it in your own lives, and again, in the people who come to see you. You know, if they come in and they tell you, well, I'm just having a really bad chronic sinus infection, and I'm draining, and, you know, I had the flu last week. So you could say, all right, you know, well, do you have allergies? What do you have going on? That's one aspect of it. But again, what else is going on in their lives? And I'll tell you, more than likely, they'll talk about something else, whether it's been happening for a year or it just happened 2 weeks ago. That either someone died or there was some trauma or there's just some lingering things that have been going on that are related to that chronic issue that they're experiencing. Is it okay to move forward? Okay. So another example, real life, of how thoughts create reality. So we're talking right now about our thoughts within our own body and the effect that it's having on our physiology. Well, what about when we think something and has an effect on something outside of us, right? So in Japan, I'll call him a researcher, Masaru Emoto wrote this book, Messages from Water. You might have seen this quite a few years ago. And what he did is he looked at the crystalline structure of water and what happened to water as it experienced different frequencies. So whether it was music, the frequency of love, peace, or something not so positive, like thoughts of hate. This is before prayer, after prayer. So when you look at this, it's clear to see that the more higher vibrational thought patterns created these beautiful structures, whereas the lower frequency ones didn't look too good. This is toxicity basically here. So basically what this kind of came down to, and I remember when I saw this, it had such a huge impact on me because I thought to myself, okay, if we're mostly made of water, right, and this is what our thoughts are doing to water, what are we doing to ourselves every second of every day, okay? And again, we're human beings. We're going to experience the spectrum of emotions. We're supposed to. But it's those repetitive, stuck places that we might sometimes need to get some help with. And this is what we're supporting our patients with. Because if we're having a lot of negativity, depression, hatred, whether it's for ourselves or someone else, this is what the fluid floating around in our body is looking like. okay? And that's probably going to grow and store a lot of different things versus something that looks like that. So how does that work? How do we affect things outside of us, okay? So my thoughts, my feelings don't only affect my physiological body, they affect the environment and people around me. So sometimes when a couple comes into my office and one of the partners isn't well, sometimes I may have to test and see how they are functioning and relating to their partner, and I will muscle test them. And sometimes their partner is not agreeing with them for whatever reason. So we have to look at how are we interacting with our spaces and how are things outside of us having an impact on who we are. And the way to do this is to look at the energetic centers, okay? And these are the chakras. So there's 7 main ones that travel along the spine. So we have the root chakra, which is kind of survival, right? It's our grounding. The sacral chakra is our inner child, okay? Some creativity. The solar plexus is our power center. The heart, center of love. The throat chakra, okay, when we think about thyroid disease, it's communication. There's creativity there also. The third eye is our intuition. And then the crown is really just our openness and non-judgmental way of being. So these energy centers are not physical. It's not something you can go and you can touch, but they exist and they expand outside of our bodies. They have a certain frequency, a certain color, a certain musical note. They are associated with different parts of the body. And they interact with the body through the endocrine and the nervous system. So, looking at the chakras again, for example, the root chakra is associated with the adrenal gland and the sacral plexus, okay? The thyroid gland and the throat chakra. When I'm treating hypothyroidism, I'm always asking, what's going on with your communication, you know? And there's a reason why there are more women that have hypothyroidism than men. It's not a coincidence, okay? Because as women, and this is not a judgment, it's just a reality, you know, there tends to be some more issues around feeling that freedom to express. So just another layer of understanding how all of these different aspects of ourselves are connected. The energetic, the emotional, the physical, no separation, one and the same. So, the beauty of what you do, right? Most of you in here. Colon hydrotherapy and that link to the lower chakras. We are honored that you take the time to do this for the people that I see. I really am. Because when they are hanging out with you and releasing on a physical level, they're also doing it in all the other layers. And it makes my job a whole lot easier. So the 3 lower chakras, which is kind of where, you know, most of that digestive tract is hanging out, we call it the physiological, the heart, the bridge, and the higher chakra is kind of the psychological. But really, they all do a little bit of each. So when your client is on that table and they're releasing, and I'm sure you've experienced it, sometimes they'll cry, sometimes they just start to talk about something that they didn't even remember. You know, maybe they were a child, and all of a sudden these things just start coming up and out. One of the things that I do encourage you to do when someone is on your table is to get quiet and allow them to direct the session. Yes, you have to control the equipment and all of that, but if you can be more present and within yourself and allow that person to kind of direct where they want to go, I have seen in my own experience that it really kind of makes more room for them to have the healing experience that they need. So I just wanted to do a few case studies, and these, I've really kind of summarized them and just mentioned very little, and I'll elaborate on some of it as I speak. So the first one, a 49-year-old perimenopausal female, so, you know, basically starting to go into menopause. She really had no significant past medical history, but she came in saying that over the last 2 weeks, she all of a sudden experienced Bell's palsy, you know, where you have the drooping of the face, and it's usually caused by a virus. And then chronic fatigue over the last 2 months with significant hair loss. She mentioned that she had a history of verbal and physical abuse from an ex-husband and a son who is currently a heroin addict. When she first came to see me, she was so weak that her husband had to kind of, you know, put her on his arm. bring her in, and lay her down on the table. Okay? During my initial intake with her, I think she spent half the time just crying. So I ran the labs and did my physical exam, and this is some of what I saw. And if there's anything here that you want an explanation on, or the words mean nothing to you, please tell me, because I won't go into a half-hour dissertation, but at least give you a concept so this makes sense. So elevated Epstein-Barr virus titers. So Epstein-Barr is the virus that causes mono, okay? You don't necessarily have to have had mono to have Epstein-Barr. It is actually pretty rampant in our culture. Okay, CRP, this is an inflammatory marker along with the SED rate that was very high in her. Low vitamin D. So I will tell you this. I'm from New York originally, and I am seeing more vitamin D deficiency in Florida than I've ever seen in New York. I mean, I was kind of surprised by that. I thought that was something I wouldn't have to treat a lot of. Vitamin D for me is another critical place that it kind of gets pushed to the side. Most of us are vitamin D deficient. One of the top dentists that I know says to me, because he treats a lot of oral cancer and different things, when we started doing research on cancer, the two things we wanted to start with as far as cancer prevention was teeth health